Thank you everyone for showing up and participating. We have a lot of ID and LA people, interior design and landscape architecture people in the place of the collaboration studio. So it's nice to see. Welcome to primarily architectural event. I think you'll find it pretty interesting. This is part of what we call the future of practice. This forum focuses on the practice of architecture, not particularly design, but how issues within practice impact design and impact how firms are run and decision making. Today we've got three leaders in their firms and in architecture in basically the regional area in Texas and New Mexico. And the subject matter, the issue that we're really looking at today is sustainability and low energy design or net zero design and how that impacts the firm. And so we're going to start with a series of questions. Our moderator today is Andrew Bernouilli and our dean. I'm sure all of you know who he is. But I'm going to introduce the other so that you have a little idea of who they are, because this is really their story about sustainability in the firm. And that's really what it's about. We're not going to show slides, okay? Because this is about conversation. And so I'm hoping that y'all will participate with follow-up questions and vigorously make a conversation a dialogue and not just a monologue from us. Mm-hmm. So I'll start with Heather. This is Heather McKinney, FAIA, LED, EPD, AP, BD plus C, all those initials.
In the alphabet left.
She's the founding principal of a firm, McKinney York Architects out of Austin, Texas. Her partner actually taught here for a while before he decided to get back into practice. Heather McKinney graduated from Stanford and received her architecture degree from the University of Pennsylvania. She is the founding partner of McKinney York Architects and has practiced architecture in Texas since 1983. The recipient of numerous design awards, her works combine traditional vernacular themes with contemporary forms and the specific needs of the client, culminating in the unique design solutions. She was elevated to fellowship in the AIA for her body of work, which displays cultivated restraint, elegance, and aesthetic maturity. She creates memorable spaces by drawing out the silent qualities of the elemental forms. The results are in architecture that is timeless. Ms. McKinney is the guiding force behind the firm's large body of award-winning work and is a high-level client satisfaction. She serves as a studio design mentor. The McKinney York design philosophy is expressed with one voice from every corner of the studio and across a range of notable projects. A trusted authority on all things design, Heather McKinney speaks and consults widely about creating projects with impact in the community. She is known for an engaging manner that extends beyond the firm into the Texas design community, where she is an active participant. From AIA Austin and the Texas Society of Architects to the Charles W. Moore Foundation and Art House, Ms. McKinney has served on these and other boards to enrich the professional experience for her peers and to create a stronger appreciation of design in the broader community. She is the winner of Tau Sigma Delta, or was awarded the Tau Sigma Delta from Texas Tech University. So we're taking her on as again. McKinney York has won over 30 AIA and TSA design awards. Most recently, McKinney York received the Texas Society of Architecture's Firm Award for the best firm in Texas, and the AIA Austin Firm Award, and the Brick Architecture Best in Class Award from the Brick Industry Association. Our next guest is Dale Decker.
Mine's shorter. It must
it's like endless. I'm sorry.
You told us beforehand it was way too long, but it was all very good.
Dale is a graduate of TTU College of Architecture and is a founding partner of Decker Parrish and Sabatini. Also, Steve Parrish is also a founding partner in the firm.
And a graduate of Texas Tech.
Yeah.
And
also
a graduate.
Also a graduate of Texas Tech, yes. Dale has more than 35 years of experience as a registered architect and planner. His extensive experiences ranges from high-tech, one-of-a-kind research facilities, award-winning school designs, socially responsible assisted living facility designs, and highly successful planning projects. An example of Dale's efforts is the nationally recognized renovation and adaptive reuse of the old Albuquerque High School near downtown Albuquerque. This project saved one of the more architecturally significant and loved structures in the community for future generations through a complex private-public partnership. Dale is also involved in enhancing the quality of life in our communities by participating as a volunteer on a variety of boards and commissions. Dale is a member of the Economic Forum, the Albuquerque Economic Development, the National Board of Directors of NAIOP, I don't know exactly what that is, but maybe he'll explain it,
Yeah.
and is a district council chair of the Urban Land Institute. As an experienced architect and planner, Dale is committed to building better communities. Among the many awards he and his firm have received are Decker Parish in Sabatini was ranked by Revenue in top 150 firms in architectural record from 2006. And American Institute of Architects, Western Mountain Region, named him the Firm of the Year, his Firm of the Year in 2003. And he's ranked into top 100 sustainable design firms in 2010 by the Green Source magazine for sustainable design. Barry Hand, AIA, LED, EV, APPDR, so I got it. They had a lot of training, a lot of certifications. He's a studio director and senior associate with Gensler, and they just go by Gensler, just Gensler.
It's a design firm.
There you go. Barry Hand, a graduate of the TTU College of Architecture, serves as a regional mixed-use and planning area leader with Gensler and directs one of the Gensler's lifestyle studios. A studio carefully calibrated to improve the places we live. Work and play with focus on mixed use, hospitality, and sports projects. There's a theme going on here. A lot of community involvement. His studio was recently commissioned to design the new indoor practice facility and expansion of the south end zone of Jones AT&T Stadium at Texas Tech. Barry brings decades of diverse and deep architectural and planning leadership experience in local and international markets, where he has developed an expertise directing large design teams and complex projects. Keen attention to client service, design, project budgets, and technical jurisdictional requirements are the foundation of his management approach and allow him to successfully orchestrate complex project processes and components. Barry currently serves as the adjunct studio critic for Texas Tech University's College of Architecture. Barry is interested in the influences of mixed-use redevelopment for revitalizing decaying urban perimeters, recently led to writing a semester-long curriculum for the College of Architecture. He and his team are currently working with the graduate studio at Urban Tech. Gensler is the largest architecture firm in the USA and the second largest in the world, and has won multiple design awards nationally and internationally. Barry was selected by the AIA Dodge chapter for the Young Architect of the Year Award. At Gensler, his projects at Yas Mall in Abu Dhabi. Is that close?
Pretty close.
Very good. For the Young, is one the best international shopping center, and his team was given the Gensler People's Choice Award for Best Adaptive Reuse. But his most cherished award is the Assistant Coach of the Year Award given by his third grade Upward Girls basketball team.
It's the hardest thing I ever did. Girls sports.
Okay, so a little long in the introduction, but I wanted you to get a feel for who these people are. They're decision makers, both in their firms and leaders in their community, and also in the region. So without any further ado, I'm going to kind of turn things over to Andrew. He's going to ask a few questions, and they're going to answer them.
Just as I get started here, one of the things I'd like to point out is that this roundtable is an event that we would like to have every year. We've had it 2 other times before, and I want to give credit to Glenn. This is Glenn's idea from about 10 years ago, and Glenn found the money. Scott Richter provided the seed money to get it started. So Glenn, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. That without Bob Pearl, I couldn't have done it. So he was very instrumental in just helping me with all the logistics and getting things done.
Very good.
And it was a team effort.
And Bob is a part of an initiative that we have to bring sustainability forward, not just in our college, but also in the state. So he's working on creating a blog that will begin to be a communication instrument between the profession and the universities, which I'm really excited about. So stay tuned. The other thing I'd like to say in introduction, if you will, is that our three panelists here are, to me, heroes. They are the heroes I've had for some time. I have admired these three people for a number of years. I met Dale when I came here, but Sinclair Black, my partner, and I admired Decker Parrish Sabatini's work for years. And I've known Heather and had the pleasure of working with her in the Texas Society of Architects. And I've followed her sustainability work, particularly because it's so sensitive. And then I've had the pleasure of working with Barry on our alumni board. And these are three incredibly talented and knowledgeable people. So Glenn gave them some questions to prepare. And so I've invented a whole new set of questions.
Excellent.
Yikes!
No, so what we're going to do is talk a little bit about the past and how sustainability became an issue. And when we were talking before, Dale mentioned a couple of interesting, how he got interested in it when he was where you are today. So Dale, could you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me here today. This is really a fun event just because my second semester at Texas Tech, we moved into this building. Okay, so that's dating me greatly, and so just accept that as it is. But I see Jim and John back there, and they know many of these people that I'm going to talk about. But, you know, I think that sustainability, it was not a mainstream word, clearly. But there were things that were happening in school that really engaged us in the whole discussion and awareness around it. And one of the classes I took was taught by a very famous architectural historian by the name of Elizabeth Sasser, who had her own unique way of teaching history and architecture. And one of the projects she talked about was Chaco Canyon. And I was from New Mexico, and my dad would take us out on trips, and we'd look at Taos Pueblo and those kinds of things. And I thought they were interesting ruins and, you know, kind of old stuff. But I didn't really understand the relevancy of it until Dr. Sasser really kind of educated us around how the buildings were sited, that it really was density, it really was community, it really was safety. There was ceremonial. It was a city within a city that survived for hundreds of years until the Anasazi mysteriously disappeared. Mm-hmm. We don't know exactly where they went, but that's part of the DNA of coming from New Mexico. I don't know if anybody here is from New Mexico, but if you are, you know kind of what I'm talking about, because it's there. It's in Santa Fe. It's in Taos Pueblo. There was another course that was taught by a gentleman by the name of Dr. Epps. And Dr. Epps, it was environmental systems. Is that what it was? I know that I really just...
I think it was an HVAC back then.
Was it HVAC? Yeah. And Dr. Epps was talking about things like shading and solar coefficients on glass and orientation of buildings and how it would affect the design and the tonnage and the use of electricity in your buildings. And so we were starting to think about those things. Then, incredibly, in 1973, we had this huge energy crisis, which drove a whole nother thing. And Heather and I were talking about this. It was kind of a counterculture thing at that time because that was the generation of hippies, and you know, being a hippie in Lubbock, Texas in 1973 could be a little bit challenging. And I see the whites back there, so they know that we had a whole bunch of them. They were concerned but interested in alternative lifestyles, and at that time it really was seen as a response to kind of the mothership Earth kind of back to the Earth movement. It wasn't seen as a response to climate change, global warming, some of these huge issues that we now understand as architects and our role in those things. But some of those same principles today, Ed Masria from Santa Fe wrote the seminal book about solar architecture. And everybody had it, you know, we all wanted to use it and put it into our buildings. It was difficult sometimes to find a client that wanted those things to occur. But then Ed went on to great things around 2030 architecture, 2030 districts now. And as the dean and I were talking, it'd be great if they updated that solar handbook, because it's probably way more relevant today in a lot of ways than it was then. But all those principles still apply. So that's a long-winded answer to your question.
Very good. And Heather, I remember buying a book about houses, sustainable houses, and then go, hey, I know this person. One of your houses was in there, and then it wasn't but maybe a year later, and I had another book, and I opened it up, and hey, wait a second, there's got another house in here. So you've been interested in sustainability for some time then. How did you get interested in it?
Well, I think that we have very common path in terms of sustainability, then kind of going to sleep for a while. But really, the things that we learned in school that still are absolutely the Bible is about adaptation of your building to the environment around it. Like, how do you take advantage of, you know, the sun and breezes and mountains and trees and everything that, you know, the climate that you have, and work with that to have a building that is in harmony with that and that's not fighting it. And that's something that I think we all learned in school. I'm sure that that's something that you all learn very much at the beginning of how you design. It's pre-design. And it's interesting because I feel like for a long time that was all there was to sustainable design, was thinking about placement of your building and orientation and whether you're going to get the breezes, all those kinds of things, and particularly in residential work, which was a lot of what my firm did for so long and still does do. But it's the last, I would say, 15 years, and I'm sure that you all would agree with me, there's just been a huge sea change in how many more things come into that equation and how systems are integrated, and there's so many more ways that are easy and are very technologically sophisticated and elegant that allow us to do so much more. And then you come back, that circle comes back around, and I'm sure you all are learning Revit like crazy now. But in my office, we're just now learning the Revit energy analysis tool that helps us to actually quantify the making of those shapes of buildings and how they sit on a site, and be able to go to our clients and say, you know, we always wanted to make that a nice skinny building, but you keep wanting to make a fat building, and now we can tell you the fat building is going to cost you more energy than the skinny building is. And you know, we have data to prove it. So we now can prove out things that we intuitively knew this was a better building, people were going to be happier in it, it was going to be more beautiful and more responsible, and by golly, it's going to use less energy. So those tools are, you know, that's a sophisticated tool, just giving us the base to make the good argument that we knew when we started, you know, practicing architecture many years ago for me. So I think that that's a big part of where I started and where I see this thing coming back and supporting us.
Very good. And Barry, I know you were at RTKL before you went to Gensler. So, and also when you were at RTKL, I also know that you really were one of the leaders in international work there. when you were involved in that, was sustainability an issue at that time, or how did that
Yeah,
work?
you know, I wanted to, when Heather talked about quantifying why buildings are the shape they are in our group, and even back when I was at RTKL working internationally, we referred to that as performance-driven design. So if you kind of let your brain get around the concept of what you're doing is performance-driven design, I'm going to probably use that term a lot. When I was working in the Middle East, my first trip to the Middle East was 2005 while the Second Gulf War was raging. And there were times, that's now 10 years ago, that energy was just insanely inexpensive there, that they didn't worry about it. And I found myself even involved in projects that had huge glass roofs just because they wanted to see the sky. And a lot of us who were on those design teams knew intuitively, almost as if we were doing something immoral. You know, it just was not sustainable to build buildings like that. And shortly thereafter, a lot of the Gulf nations began to implement extremely aggressive energy policies, to the point that buildings we started designing without energy policies, by the time we got them through their municipalities, we had triple layer of heavily tinted, low E glass. I mean, they're covering cladding buildings with high performance glass that is practically equivalent to an opaque material. So, but what I saw growing up in the 70s, you know, I remember the energy crisis as a young child, and the nation kind of rallied around that, but then it went away, kind of like, I don't know, many of you probably don't know, America at one time was going to adopt metric. And it was kind of a national cause, and everybody just kind of got tired of it, and we didn't do it. So that's kind of how I think it happened in the energy crisis. Energy got cheap again, and I grew up in North Texas where energy was cheap, and the houses were big, and the hair was big, and I graduated from high school in the mid-'80s and came to Tech, and the first time I ever heard the word solar or anything was in some of my early classes here, and they handed out the passive solar book and the shading coefficient calculator that was this wheel you spun, and that was the first time I'd ever heard anything like that. And we began to integrate it into freshman, sophomore, junior year projects. And we were joking in our prior session about trom walls and thermal mass, things like that. You guys probably know just almost instinctively. But there was a time when that was cutting edge. And so going back to the Middle East, what they're doing a lot there is a lot of shading. You almost can't build a parking structure there without shading because the sun and the heat tears up cars. In Qatar, a lot of the structures have to have opaque cladding. So when you look at Middle East design, a lot of what you're seeing is grillage or sun shading devices on buildings. It's really the way the Moors built 1,000 years ago because it was adapting to the local vernacular. So it's kind of like we got stupid and now we're getting smart again as people, because energy and water and all that stuff is going to matter. And especially for those of you that are graduating soon, you're going to find as design professionals, your lives are going to be about infill, it's going to be about high performance buildings. Buildings are not getting more simplistic. They're getting way, way more complicated. And there's more lawyers every day, and there's more investment money that drives these buildings. And so buildings, clients put in your hands as an architect a lot of money. So you'll be entrusted with that to ultimately generate the highest performance possible product. And Heather, that's where I think computers have really changed the day. You know, 30 years ago, we turned a building at a certain angle because we wanted to cast the short side to that deep west setting sun. But now we can literally, through Revit and other stuff, we can literally custom shape window awnings for how the sun's going to set over them. So it's really amazing. Boy, if I'd gone through school when we had digital design like we do now, it'd been a lot more fun.
Well, all three of you have talked about commitment. Decker Parrish Sabatini committed to sustainable design when they designed their offices in Albuquerque. And that was a big commitment back then. Do you want to talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, and this is how your generation impacts my generation.
Right.
I mean, it really is.
It comes from the bottom.
We were getting ready to build, our new office building was a 85,000 square foot building, great site. and we were going to be the developer. So we were architects and developers, and we had to kind of address all those same questions of first cost, operating cost. And we had a group of individuals in our firm, young Turks, that came to the leadership of the firm and said, we think you ought to be the first LEED certified building, gold LEED certified building in the state of New Mexico. That was the goal. And so after we kind of understood the program, okay, because we had heard about it, and there was LEED was out there, was a new thing, there was a competing rating system called Green Globes, and you know, we kind of looking at that, but really it was LEED that was selected by us, and we went through the process, and it really impacted our design on every project moving forward. And we were able to achieve LEED Gold at the time. Over code, it was saving about 42% energy savings over traditional costs. Our utility bills were less, which drove to cover the cost for the additional expense at that time, because we had to set up a construction recycling program. They didn't even have one in the state of New Mexico, so we had to invent and create one just in order to get those points. And we had to do a lot of things. Our mechanical engineers, we did the first underfloor air distribution system for a multi-story building at that time in our market. It's a little quirky, but it works great, and I would do it again. But as a developer owner, we had to make a business decision, and it's paid off tremendously for us, because the work environment, the views, the light, the natural light, just the whole sense of place, people appreciate it, and they instantly get it. And that's what's cool. When you do something that people instantly and intuitively get, you don't really have to explain. They come and they say, wow, we love the views, we love the light. And those are things that we're building into all of our buildings now, and it's kind of standard practice.
Yeah, there you go.
And Heather, when you mentioned a minute ago software, has that changed now? Do you think that is the process different now that you have that kind of feedback mechanism?
Yeah, I think for us it is, because we were talking earlier about what drives this process forward, and that we need good arguments. A lot of times we need to drag our clients along with us. We can't expect to just sit and wait for some enlightened client to come and say, I want this, now you go do it. We need to convince them that it's in their best interests to do it. And so all these tools that help us to make that argument are important. And for a lot of our clients, we have such a broad spectrum of work that we do, from very little residential projects on up into institutional work. A lot of our work for corporate and institutional clients is on existing buildings. And most of our clients, regardless of where they are in that spectrum, are what we call owner-occupiers. They're people that want to stay in their buildings. They're stewards of their buildings. If they're churches or if they're universities, they have to look at the long term of what the life of that building is, what the energy costs of that building are, what the maintenance costs of that building are. And for our residential clients, how that building is going to evolve with them through the life of their family. And really, I guess most of our clients feel the same way in terms of flexibility. So we have a better argument for them if we can prove out those long-term benefits. We don't have very many clients who are looking at the first costs exclusively. Now, obviously, everybody, as my partner says, it always comes down to money. Everybody worries about those first costs. It's ridiculous to say that they don't. But if you can prove out that it makes sense, besides just being, a good thing to do for the world, most of our clients can make informed decisions, and not always are they going to choose to do everything that we're recommending, but hopefully they choose enough of them that we can sleep at night. So that's I think that computers are part of what helps to make those arguments for us.
So Barry, in terms of responding to clients, and I guess I have two questions. One is, are you finding that clients generally are more receptive today than they used to be, and a little bit, what reasons do you think for that? And the other question is, in a large organization, how do you set some of those standards, especially with people coming up? Obviously, there's a learning curve, learning which software works. I think there are 140 some energy evaluation tools out there, all do different things. So first of all, sort of what is a client's perspective at this point? And then second of all, how do you then train the people who work in your studio to be able to address that?
Well, I work in a studio that's mixed-use sports and hospitality. We do have, as Glenn mentioned, the stadium project here at Tech. That's obviously an institutional client, so I'm going to set that aside, because the institutional clients, generally as a rule, they have some form of criteria that they want you to meet, whether it's LEED or whatever. Maybe they have their own system. But then as you kind of trickle down the tree or up the tree, however you look at it, the more your money is private development, there's less and less interest in LEED certifications. Now, what I have begun to see in the last 5 years is, or I'd say in the last 10 years, even our private development clients, I began to see this about 10 years ago. They would say, oh yeah, we're going to do LEED because it's a great marketing thing. They're going to put it on their brochure. It'll attract the young people who want to live here. And so that was kind of the early adapter development community who wanted to do it for marketing purposes. But we have another brand of client, development client, that honestly they've kind of advanced beyond LEED. And they'll tell you, when you ask that question, do you want to do LEED cert? They'll tell you, yeah, we're kind of past LEED. And what they mean by that is, we want you to design with the principles in mind, but we're not going to mess with LEED certification. I'm a LEED accredited professional myself, but I've been of the belief about 10 years now that eventually a lot of this LEED checklist and stuff that we do, it's going to be rolled into building codes anyway. A lot of it already has, and the municipalities are going to drive it. I think the young people, the students who come into our firm, A, you drive it, but B, the municipalities drive it as well. The older folks at the top of the firm who may or may not even be into LEED accreditation or sustainability, it's not coming from them, I'll tell you right now. Software, sustainability, new techniques, new design, parametric design, all of that stuff comes from the bottom of our firm up, which means it's coming from you into the firms. So that's how you can really shape the design industry going forward. Trust me, that's how the design industry's always been shaped, is with the young people. So, it's up to the 40 plus just to manage the money and all the, insurance and lawyers and things like that. So I'm gonna go back to that in a minute. But to answer your other question, which was, remind me?
About the structure of your firm. Like you have 40-some people in your studio.
Yeah.
How do you train them?
Okay. Yeah, I work for Gensler. We have 5,000 people worldwide, which, obviously we don't have that many in Dallas. There's 200 in Dallas, and I have 42 in my studio. But the one luxury of being a big organization is that we have entire practice areas of firm-wide people who are dedicated to research and development, or they're dedicated to sustainability. We have a firm-wide guy in Houston who would be great to come out and speak to you guys. His whole job is driving sustainability initiatives in the firm. And we've begun to appoint, people in specific offices who have, I mentioned the word design performance. We have 4 basic kind of DNA in the Dallas office. You're either design management, design performance, design realization, or design experience. If you're design performance, which I'll tell you right now is the most rare DNA in our office, those are the guys that are really into parametric modeling. They're into that quantifying, proving up performance-driven design, why it's quantifiably the best design. That's actually in my studio where we have pretty big shortage, people that are into design performance. So that's kind of how we're seeing it trained into our firm, obviously from initiatives that come down from high. The firm will say, hey, we're going to comply with AIA 2030. And what that means is all the project managers get a spreadsheet that you have to turn in all your project metrics. It's kind of a pain, to be honest with you, but hey, that's living, right? So that's one way that it comes into the firm, but the other way that it comes into the firm is, about 5 years ago, a lot of the big firms who wanted to differentiate themselves, they said, hey, if you're associate or above, you have to be lead accredited. And then lastly, it just comes in from the young people who want to bring that component and they're hungry for it. So at least once a week, I'm seeing Justin Liao, he worked with us this summer. At least once a week there's a luncheon or a training or something that's happening in our office that's geared to sustainability or building performance or building products. So we're sort of training from every angle in our firm because at the end of the day, take City of Dallas. The City of Dallas now has Dallas Green Building Code, which is basically LEED certification. You're mandated to have 40 points. So what I tell our clients is, look, you're going to get 40 points if you're in the City of Dallas anyway. You might as well go ahead and go for the final 2 points. And once they hear it that way, okay, they'll say, that's cool, let's do it. But that's a great example of how, call it what you want, social engineering or what, but when the municipalities kind of set up that legislation, then you sort of force the issue. But we've got a lot of that in our world, okay? I mean, we all accepted unleaded gasoline one day when nobody wanted it. I mean, we all go through security at the airport. We've got all kinds of things around us that we use to shape our culture and society, and that's just one of them. I was personally really surprised that the City of Dallas did that. I mean, Texas cities tend to have this reputation for being business friendly, right? Well, at the end of the day, I think that is the ultimate business friendly because they're forcing the corporations to get up to speed because ultimately that's where the young people want to be. They want to be in that, a little bit more progressive realm with building technology.
Thank you. And Dale, you have several different design groups in your, I think you have interior design, and do you have landscape as well?
We have landscape in-house as well, yes.
So as you designed your office building, but then going forward now, how do those different disciplines talk to each other with regard to sustainability? Are there three kind of different conversations going in three different directions, or is it just so much a part of your common culture, your collective culture is better?
Well, clearly in our environment, water, energy, air quality are the three things we're looking at on every building, whether they're interiors, landscape, designers, or architects. And, really, and I think one thing that we should recognize, okay, is that the whole construction industry in the last 10 years has really there's been a revolution. It's evolved so tremendously relative to the types of materials, the types of systems that are available, the awareness within our profession around this.
And that's a big deal, because changing the construction industry is like turning the Titanic.
and really, recycling. That's a whole. That's the thing. How many contractors 10 years ago? I mean, you would have said we're going to go down and do downstream recycling of certain materials, and they go, "What the heck?
Yeah,
I'm not going to do that." So I mean, the whole profession really has changed and adapted to this call. We lead the charge in a lot of ways, but we're not out there building the buildings. We're not out there doing a lot of this stuff. So it has been an industry response. And as a result, you got to almost treat it holistically in your design process, right? Because it just can't be one piece that you're dealing with. You got to deal with the whole thing. And so, I think it's just standard operating procedure that we talk like this and we think like this. We think about the materials, what they're made of, how buildings go together differently, what kind of waste streams we might be creating with certain materials. So, it really has been, it'll be interesting to look back, 20 years from now at this very compressed period of time where we made, with technology, design practices, had huge advances. And you can look back in history, where probably building technology hadn't changed much from 1850 back, and then there's these eras.
The rate of change has gone vertical.
And technology really has driven a lot of that.
And let me add just one thing, because that's a great point. First, it was a design industry that bought into it, and then it was the construction industry that accepted it. But sometimes the hardest part in a real performance-driven building is getting the operator to run it like a performance-driven building. If they turn off the shading devices because one broke and they don't want to mess with it, that sort of defeats the purpose. If they don't like their composting toilet because it got stinky one day, we'll fix it. Figure out why it's doing that, So it's really going back to the building operators too.
It's interesting to me that we often think about the larger structure of making change in the world. But here's a side note. The United States ranks number 4, I believe, in population along the coast. Yet it's number 20 in terms of how much pollution we send into the ocean. And the pollution, by the way, is very small in comparison with China, who's number 1.
Yeah.
You know what the difference is? Recycling. And that recycling is not like it's a federal law.
Yeah.
It's because we all accept that that's part of the culture that we recycle. Heather, when people come to your firm and you're talking about, I love houses because there's a sort of quintessential design question. It's like when you think about the Villa Savoie, for example, or Frank Lloyd Wright's Kaufman House, you think about a quintessential a gesture. So when you see people coming today, at what point do they start asking questions about sustainability or energy or response to climate? Or generally, do you have to bring it up?
I think that's probably a two-part question. One has to do with the fact that somebody who's coming to us for a home is coming because they cannot find that home out there on the marketplace. They want something that is uniquely tuned to them and to perhaps the site that they've chosen. And so they're looking for something that is very much geared to them and to their desires. So it's a lot about what makes them comfortable, and that's not just physically or emotionally comfortable, but actually sometimes morally comfortable. And so in talking about conservation of resources, I think most people, when they're talking about their own homes, are more prepared to make that a piece of it. So then we often get if it's a couple, one of the couple who also is interested in performance, interested in data, that want to know, if, in Austin, yes, you can, have solar panels and you can see how that actually affects your energy bill. You actually can see month to month what is happening, what you're giving back to the system, and what you're being paid for that. So that I think it happens a lot. And I wrote an article on a house that Larry Speck from Page did in New Mexico. You may know this house in Santa Fe. And the husband, he was all about the metrics. He wanted to be able to see kind of in the diurnal rhythm of things how that house performed. And the beauty of it was that they could tune the house to better perform. And it's exactly what you said. It's, that whole notion for us as architects is that we're not there just to build a building. We are there from the envisioning, from the twinkle in somebody's eye, way past the point when they're occupying that building. We should be there for years after they finish that building, working with them to optimize it and to tune it so that it works. And that's a service that should be integral to what, who we are. Texas Architect a few years ago started talking about what makes a building good. And it's not just, we shouldn't be just publishing beautiful buildings or buildings on the cutting edge of design. We should be publishing buildings that perform, buildings that year after year after year do better than we imagined that they would do, and better in not just conserving energy, but better in making community, better in making a place where people want to be. And I think that that's a big part of where we're going and what people ask us, not just as I ramble on past the residential world, but.
So indeed the performances that you set, the performances that your clients set, are part of the design process, but sometimes they conflict.
Oh, sure.
And then also sometimes our internal design response, which may be motivated by issues of concept, might not necessarily be in line with those issues. So I have a sort of a question, because you raised this issue of performance, which how did you put it just a second ago? It was I've forgotten exactly how you put it, but I liked how you put it. So it made me think about when these conflicts come up. Do sometimes as architects we like to have our cake and eat it too. So then we start looking for maybe a technical solution.
Sure.
Oh, I know what made me think of it. Is when you were talking about performance, I was beginning to think about the idea that a building performs naturally, and that it's a kind of a more natural response to, let's say energy concerns, because that's a little bit easier to identify, as opposed to, okay, I have a building, conceptually I want it to look like this, but it's got the wrong orientation. So then
now I have to put blinders on the outside of the windows.
Exactly. So then it becomes kind of a technical solution in terms instead of kind of a natural solution. Do you have any? I mean, in terms of design philosophy, is that an issue that comes up?
Yeah, it does, and I think that at some point, when your building is fighting, your pure party is fighting the circumstances around it. You have to go back and question whether you were being realistic and or whether you were being a dilettante and you're just doing it for the pure beauty of it. And in fact, it's not beautiful if it's fighting, and if you have to create all these external add-ons to make it work. I think that is I'm as guilty of that as anybody, but I realize it's a flaw.
It's always a bit of a balancing act. So I'd like to push this over to Barry for a moment. So in terms of the design process and trying to balance this, when we're in the point where it's either a natural solution, so to speak, or are we having to create a technical solution? Or the other thing that happens, which is very much an important part of architecture, is architecture's responsibility to be hyperbolic, in the sense that we do communicate the issues of our time, sometimes symbolically. So that's actually a third dimension now. How do you work through those things?
You know, I grew up in a neighborhood where people had cedar shingles on their roof, and I heard a comedian say one time that that archaeologists will look at our culture in 1,000 years and they will say, these are the people that put kindling on their roofs. And they're now extinct. You know, we don't know why the Anasazi were. So we can kind of be judged by how we build things. I'm going to tell a couple little quick anecdotes. How many of you in the room are landscape students? Okay, let me start with this. This is a little off script, but I want to make sure we're talking to landscape students. We were interviewing consultants last week in our office for a large, what I call a amenitized corporate district. So, huge Fortune 500, probably Fortune 50 client who's building an amenitized corporate district around an existing headquarters. So they want to get some good press on this. They want to tell a great story. Part of that story is they're taking a suburban headquarter campus and they're lining it, ringing it with lifestyle, you know, residential housing, dining, just entertainment. It's really kind of the new mega trend in mixed use right now. So one of their criteria was they want to get a great story out of the deal. They want to get international awards. So we're interviewing landscape architecture firms and the client keeps asking these landscape architects, what awards have you won? What do we need to do to win awards? And thankfully, every one of them to a man said, hey, if you let us do our job, we will win awards. Let's don't go into this with the criteria to win awards. Let us do our job and you will win international awards. And the point was, every candidate told us, in today's world, to win awards in landscape architecture, it has to be highly, highly sustainable. You have to paint, you have to have decorative, storm drainage, and you've got to really turn everything into almost theater, your sustainability story in landscape. So if you're here in your landscape, that really is your future. Now, remind me what your question was, because I had a great point.
Well, having to do with, there's one way of thinking about trying to make the building respond in a natural way or a technical way or in a hyperbolic way.
Yeah, okay. So you've all been through the LEED scorecard, right? Do you do that here?
Yeah,
okay. So you start off with, say, we like to say at Gensler, our projects are 80% there right out of the gate. Our teams, they're just by nature doing sustainable things. And even if the client tells us, don't worry about it, our buildings tend to be about 80% there at the LEED scorecard. So, however, on almost every project, we find ourselves in these situations. So I'm going to say I'm guilty too. You get to 36 points. You got to have 42. You get to 36 points, and then before you know it, you're picking up the phone telling the mechanical engineer, hey, you're going to have to upsize this, and we're going to have to really do that. I know I said this about that, but now you're going to have to change your fresh air scheme. So it's true. I think we do find ourselves turning it sometimes, and I'll say the final 20% sometimes tends to be a more technical response to the problem. I'd like to think that all of our clients came out of the gate kind of like Heather's do, that they want to do something really uber sustainable but there are some prerequisites in the LEED system, and I'm not trying to be LEED centric because there's a lot of great other systems, but in the LEED system alone there are some prerequisites in that system that literally disqualify certain projects. If you can't meet certain prerequisites in the LEED system, you're out of business. So I don't know if that's anything that needs to be changed about LEED. I know you said LEED 4 is about to come out. I'll be interested to see how that's changed.
And LEED 4 is like right up your alley because they're a lot more about performance based and about metrics year after year after year, being able to track buildings, and they have something called like a virtual medal or something, and if your building isn't performing after 2 years, they take away your LEED certification.
Whoa, well that's where it needs to go.
So they're going through that.
Okay.
Yeah, and Heather said something, I think, that, tuning buildings, right? Performance of buildings. We look at the impact of technology. Really, technology really has made us as designers way more honest. When you think about it. We can't really lie about stuff anymore because we can measure everything. And so if you look at the next generation, really where we're headed is artificial intelligence and sensors on everything in every building.
It will be.
And you'll be able to get real-time data analytics on how your building really is performing. So how is that going to impact how you guys design buildings, how you look at buildings, and how you think about the continued operation? Because it's just not nice to go in there and cut the ribbon and go into a great space. You're actually going to have a client there who's going to say, you know what, I paid you guys to get to this level of performance, and I think the key word there is performance.
Yeah.
But we need the tools then to tune the building because of what you just said.
Yeah.
We don't operate them.
That's right.
So if we don't have the ability to say, you know, here's how you tune your car to really make it get the 24, 30 miles per gallon that it says on the sticker, then we're going to be, as a profession, under a lot of pressure and a lot of scrutiny. And there's a lot of attorneys out there that would just love to get out there and tell you that, boy, you promised this and you delivered this. They still look at it as some kind of product liability issue on a lot of things. But fortunately, sensors and the whole evolution, again, of the construction industry and the building trades are going to put us in a position to where we can tune those buildings. You know, if we start off honestly, you know, and use technology to keep us honest in our design, then there's the technology to fine-tune those buildings to where they really work. And again, you think about it, a lot of the technological advances have been promoted to overcome human stupidity. You know, seat belts, airbags, just about everything you can think of, sensors on your tires in your car. I mean, you know, it's all there because humans are imperfect and is trying to make us a little bit better. So that's kind of the next evolution, in my opinion, is there's going to be a sensor on everything, and we're going to measure everything, and we're going to be able to tune our buildings like we've never been able to do it before. You might not do it. You guys out there will probably do it.
Yeah. Well, it's true. I mean, the operations guys, facility manager people now, they will tell you that they got their building, you know, up on their laptop at home. If an air conditioning unit goes down, they can get up out of bed and turn it on at 3 in the morning. So, I mean, there's already a lot of smart technology in buildings, and that's why I said earlier, buildings are not getting simpler. They're getting way, way more complex.
This is a great question because I think you hit on, I think, one of the real difficulties that architecture and architectural education has today. Macho Kaku is a scientist that we see on TV, and he talks about the future. He's written a book about the future, and indeed, sensors everywhere, feedback everywhere. Your glasses change, the walls change, the building changes, opportunities to be able to harness solar power actually on every surface. Great opportunities for us, but maybe not exactly in our culture. And I'm going to sort of stop for a second and go to the idea about how as a profession, how we will adopt. In a recent Wired article that features Dr. Dre and Iovine, who's a producer, probably one of the most successful music producers in the country, they've teamed up to change the way in which music is reproduced. They're trying to change the way music is reproduced. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is fidelity, but the other reason is the music industry is one of the few industries, believe it or not, that has actually lost ground over the past decade. A significant drop in sales. And the reason why is because instead of understanding the future, they decided to fight it. And because of that, the world then adopted a whole set of other ways to appropriate music. Will we be there? Will we be like the music industry if we don't change? And how do we change here? I mean, right? I don't want to, but I'm going to do what I don't want to do, which is to mix two issues. But we're looking at 13 years to be an architect, which is ridiculous. None of you should do that. Go take your test as soon as you can. But the architecture profession is struggling a little bit right now. And we know that at the center of our future is our responsibility for the environment. All of the people here have heard me say there are 3 great professions in the world: law for justice, medicine for health, architecture, landscape architecture, interior design for the environment. And the environment has ever more become more and more important. I always say that however you go to a doctor or lawyer for a problem, you go to an architect for a dream, but what cost is that dream? And will we be involved with that dream in the future if we don't figure out both our profession in terms of being able to have the tools to be able to deal with these issues, and also education. And so all three of you hire people. Education, how are we doing right now? Are we doing okay, or where's it going? Where should it go?
Yeah, I personally think that the graduates we're seeing that come out of University of New Mexico, we hire a lot of Texas Tech folks, is outstanding, because you guys are bringing something that is critical. We're at an age change here, let's face it. I mean, you know, what we talk about now and in 10 years is going to be totally different. There's all sorts of data out there that would suggest that 50% of the jobs that we see today will be done either by robots or artificial intelligence in 10 years. Now, you think about that, you ask yourself, well, what are the other 50% of the people going to be doing who have jobs now? Well, they're going to either have to adapt, or they're not going to be very happy campers, which is a whole social, political issue that we have to deal with. But, you know, this is probably the most exciting time that you could ever exist and be an architect in our profession, because there is a melding of creativity and technology, and Steve Jobs really kind of was the guy that melded design, technology, and very useful products that perform. And we have that expectation on our iPhones. We're going to have that expectation in our buildings and where we live, and in our utility bills, and how much water we use. That's where you kind of get this meshing, this great opportunity for us to be creative beyond our wildest imaginations, not just hampered by pen and paper and computers, but how you integrate all of these things is just, I mean, I think in 10 years, you guys out there are going to be doing things that are just going to blow our mind, okay? And that's, just look where the iPhone was 10 years ago. Yeah. It wasn't even, I mean, you know, it was Steve Jobs' dream. So, you know, I think you're learning a process that's way different, way more unique than what we did, because we were learning really from the past, okay, and trying to apply it to the future. We're in the future. Now we're trying to apply the future to the future. So, this is going to be fun. You guys are going to have a blast. That's all I can say. I'm having fun because I tell our guys, they come to me and I say, go do it. I don't care. I don't care how much it costs. I don't care how long it takes. If somebody comes to me with an idea and I look at it and go, damn, that's a great idea. Go do it.
So there's something else that I think weighs into that, it's sort of big change of how I think you all will function in the workplace versus the way that we've functioned. And it does have to do with the collaborative nature of our work. When we were talking about the construction industry becoming a big part of the sustainable move, the construction industry is now, those people are at the table with us at the beginning of process, not after we finish designing. They're there contributing their knowledge at the very beginning. And the same is true, you know, of a lot of our other collaborators. Our design team is very large for many projects because people are bringing specific skills, but it's a holistic picture, and by working together from the very beginning, things are vastly improved and a much richer, more successful project comes out of it. And I think that that's true, you know, kind of across the board with the way that the buildings can be made better. It's not so much about energy savings alone, but in the conservation and reuse of that energy, being able to take the heat that's thrown off from one piece of equipment and use it to to run some other piece of equipment within your building, being able to take water that was once potable and use it once it's no longer something that you can drink for other uses in your building. And as municipalities start to adapt what they will accept us to do, we have that much more opportunity to leverage those systems and to overlay them. And really what is an elegant design is when you can get something working on many levels to do many things harmoniously. And I think that that's what we're seeing more and more and more in these sustainable drives that we're seeing. We're seeing things that are getting that synergy, systems that are getting that energy and synergy from overlay. And I think that's very, very exciting to see that happen.
The question is how we're doing. Yeah, you know, probably in the last 10 years of my career, I've been involved in recruiting and hiring probably 100 new grads. I love the practicum summer internship program because it's a great way to sneak into a firm and get to know them and them know you. What I've learned over the last 10 years, looking at grads from, I just call it kind of the Big 12 schools, they're all generally pretty good. When I went to Gensler 2.5 years ago, there were probably 5 tech grads out of 100 people. And now that we're a little over 200, there's about 35 tech grads. And it's been fun to watch, you know, some of the Aggies who complain about the invasion of Red Raiders, yet they'll go into a conference room with one and hire them. And nothing gives me greater pleasure than to, you know, as much as they say there ought to be a quota, then they'll go in and hire one because the guy has a really killer parametric design portfolio, you know? So to answer your question, how are you doing? I'm going to start with a critique and then I'm going to go back to the good stuff. Andrew and I have talked about this on the advisory council before. Communication, communication, communication. Do not underestimate the power of communication skills. And I'm not talking about just speaking, but that's important. I'm also talking about writing. Andrew's heard me grouse about this. Folks, if you can't write, you can't lead projects. Yeah. If you can't communicate with your client, they're not going to trust you with $100 million. Okay? So go to English class over here and listen and do the assignments. Because if you come into any profit-centered organization, and probably university, if you can't communicate, you're not employable. Okay, is that strong enough?
Yeah, that's good.
Now I want to do the good stuff, okay? The good stuff is, in the last 5 years, I've seen the Texas Tech portfolios literally go exponential in quality. I think the digital technology has really helped. We finally got past the days of PDFs looking really clunky, the line weights. I think you've done a better job on that. But the parametric design, I think, is an area where Tech is really leading. Not the only school, but I think you're doing a good job. We hired a young man in December. We didn't really have a position or posted, but he came in, had a fantastic portfolio, and a Canadian and an Aggie hired him. I didn't even meet him. And they brought him to my studio and put him in there, and he's done great. He's been a star. It's so exciting to see the young people bringing digital to design into our office. Right now, I've got a crew back in our office working on, there's an exhibit every year in Dallas called Retrospect. And it's just where architects kind of get together and do these sculptural exhibits and try to outdo one another. And you know, we're not going to be outdone in that exhibit. So we've unleashed the hounds of parametric design. and this is something we haven't talked about. 3D printing. I mean, seriously? When you're in school, 3D printing? I mean, we print everything.
3D printing took us like 4 all-nighters.
Yeah, and slice up fingers with razor blades. So 3D printing, I mean, if you guys don't have 3D, I know you have 3D printing here. That's really also revolutionized the design process. You know, I had the chance to go to Frank Gehry's office about 25 years ago when I was about your age. And he had this massive table about half the size of that part of the room where he just had all these wood blocks just thrown out on the table, little blocks. And he would say to somebody, hey, go shave that corner off right there. It's kind of when Frank began to get into his real biomorphic stuff. But he had this big table of blocks in the middle of his office, and that's how they designed their projects. And so that was kind of pre-3D printing, but now we can come up with 20 quick concepts and turn to somebody and say, hey, burn these tonight, and we'll look at them in the morning. So I think Tech has done a great job of bringing the digital design, that kind of technical performance expertise. But I hate to be mundane. Don't get out of school not knowing how to write. That's really key. I'll tell you right now, if somebody in our team copies me on an email and their grammar was terrible, I mean, the next step I make is you're not writing any more emails to our clients. And you don't want to be there as a professional. Don't be that person. Learn how to communicate. I know with smartphones and autocorrect and all that, it's dulled our senses. I have it with my children too, okay? But don't underestimate the power of written and verbal communication. And that's where I want to end, is design voice. We use that term in our studio a lot. Where is this person's design voice? You have to have a design voice. Unless you're super talented like Heather and you have this really great boutique firm, to make it in big design firms, you have to have a design voice. And all that means is you can sell your ideas, and when you talk, people listen. It's a credible voice. Don't underestimate that. I was the youngest sibling in my family, so I got beat up all the time. So I learned young how to talk, see, because that was the only advantage I had. I could out-talk my brother. So don't underestimate the power of communication. Okay?
We're adding on to our building with a new digital design and fabrication, interdisciplinary digital design and fabrication facility, and we have several donors, but one special one who's given us 3/4 of the money to do it. And to show her what we were doing, we 3D printed the design, and then took it down to show it to her.
And as great as technology is, there's nothing that will light up a client's face like a physical model.
Yeah.
Throw that model in front of them, and now they get it. Now they see what you're talking about.
That's true.
And that's how you'll sell your designs every time.
So I wonder about all of you, if you have questions about sustainability and energy or practice, or any questions at all about design.
Well, I have a question. And I have a little bias in this question, but it seems like to me that the architectural profession has ignored probably one of the most fundamental energy conserving energy issues in daylight. It doesn't get into designs, or doesn't get into many designs. I mean, or at least the mags don't talk about it. And I'm curious why that is, because the light and the envelope are the two things that about all energy saving that are most things that we have control over, that we are responsible for. I mean, with a mechanical system, we have some control there, but really that's about mechanical engineering.
And I think that is changing in LEED version 4. There's a lot more focus on the sense of well-being in a space and how much natural light affects that, which is another reason why those, in that Revit energy analysis, when you make that narrow building that gets natural light deeper in there, then you don't have to turn on your lights, then you're not producing the heat that comes out of the lights that makes your HVAC have to go up, blah, blah, blah. So I think that there is more focus on that for sure than there used to be.
Most definitely.
I want to respond to that. Gensler keeps data and record kind of like the Third Reich did. It's amazing the data that we call it the digital library. You can get on the digital library at Gensler and find amazing compilations of data. Our workplace, which is a fancy word for corporate interiors, our workplace team has actually published some information on, and HR people are totally into this. They've published white papers on the effects of natural light in workplace. And it goes back to just frankly employee satisfaction and how often they miss work. Let me tell you, if you can reduce employee absenteeism by 5% in a Fortune 500 company, you're probably saving $20 million a year. That's the actual quantification of going back and showing the facilities manager why he needs to put in an automated shading system. He can open up his building and pull blinds down and pay $1 million to do it if he saves $5 million a year. Those are just natural quantifiable metrics that facilities managers, CEOs, and HR people eat up like crazy. You're probably right. The design profession, I don't think we talk as much about that as we do energy. But when you're talking to people who have human capital they're dealing with.
But it seems to me it should just be a natural thing.
Should be. You're right. Yeah.
You shouldn't even design an office building that isn't like that.
You're right.
Oh, talk about it. Talk about schools. What happened to schools in the 80s?
Yeah. Oh, and they shut down all the daylight.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. They took all those beautiful daylit elementary schools and covered up the windows
And I've read statistics that if you don't have natural light in a classroom, the average amount of learning, I don't know exactly how they got, is down by about 4%. Now, maybe that doesn't seem like much for 1 year, but compound that over 12, and you've got a problem. So I don't know what the answer to that is, because it seems like teachers seem to want to cover all the walls and not have any windows.
But you know, interesting.
I haven't found it's from the teachers, it's from administrators. That's what I've found. And I mean, they're the ones closing the windows, but it's usually an argument that we're saving energy. We want less windows because we're
They just
saving energy.
don't want
It's
distraction.
kind of Cro-Magnon view of how you save energy.
But you know that, natural light changes hour by hour by hour, and there's going to be a new LED bulb that comes out that's got a control on it that will actually change its color, temperature, hour by hour by hour to mimic morning light versus mid-morning light versus afternoon light and near evening light, because they find that we sleep better if we have a natural day of light, and therefore we work better, and therefore we're more productive, and the Fortune 5 companies love us as workers. So, I mean, it's clear that the industry at large is recognizing the value of natural light and the effects of that.
I think you're right. I think it goes back to cheap energy and then expensive energy and facilities managers thinking they can lose money. I mean, 100 years ago, we didn't design houses or schools without windows because it was, in many ways, the only source of light we had. Now, I don't think they were doing it because they thought people would be happier. They were doing it just because it was the only source of light we had. But then energy became cheap, and hey, we don't want to mess with all those windows. I went to school in Plano in a windowless high school. There wasn't a window on the property. And I'm sure they've opened it up since. Some of you may have gone to Plano Senior High. I think it's what contributed to my ADD. I was in a weird learning environment,
Well, I think also just real quickly on that point, culturally we're changing, right? As to how we use space. So, the interior design folks in our office, right? We're open, we're deploying those principles, and we're naturally daylit, and there's groups that don't even turn on their lights all day. So, open office 20 years ago was, Herman Miller's dreamscape, right? Well, now culturally, with collaboration and the types of things, the way we work has changed. Plus, the systems are that much better. And then from a building ownership point of view, since we own our building, they're way more flexible. And we can accommodate change, rapid change, based on project teams, how we work. And then it's amazing when clients walk into spaces like that, particularly if they're from corporations. They look at it. It used to be that it was Steelcase and Herman Miller and Hayward. They would always sell the open office. They were selling it off a showroom. We could sell it in our office. That's why we built our office that way. So, there's great benefit to having those spaces where you can show people what it means and how it works.
Anybody other questions? Anybody have any questions? Yes,
When we heard the word stories at the beginning when Glenn introduced us, so can I ask each of you to tell us one quick story about using these principles or these in your one incident that's either uplifting or sad or funny or something that you remember in your practice that deals with sustainability or energy efficiency?
Well, I can start with that. Austin has a green business program that we decided, we had our own building, which is a retrofit that we did. And so as a firm, we eat together once a week, and we decided that we were going to become the first platinum green business people in Austin. And so there's a lot of things just like LEED that you had to do, but a number of them had to do with how you function in your building. You know, how do you track your metrics for the energy that you use, the water that you use, how much waste you have going out of your building, and how can you improve that? So we divided up in our office. Each person had a zone of influence, and they could come back to the partners and say, okay, we think that we could really improve our performance by doing X, Y, and Z. You know, what's the budget? And so we set aside a budget to sort of do things, and then we did stuff like take away everybody's trash cans so that they had to get up to throw something away. They had a recycling can, but not a trash can. So the effort of having to go all the way across the office to throw a piece of paper away meant that they weren't going to print that. They were going to put it in a file digitally. And so we did a lot of those things, and one of the things that we decided to do was track the electric use in the office separate from the energy use for conditioning the space. And so we have this thing, and I actually have to write it down because I keep forgetting. Has anybody ever heard of a Belkin Conserve Insight device? It's a device that you put between everything that you plug into a wall and it tracks how much energy that device uses. So we put it on every single thing that we plug in the office, and we did a tracking of how much energy we're using other than what our air conditioning was. And then, so we knew how much that was. And then we decided we were going to put a new coating on our flat roof and see how that performance would work. And so we did this uniform coating, which was, this wet thing that you put on, and then you put on a little skin of something, and then you put on another wet thing, and then you put on a white coating on top of that, which is the sacrificial layer and has to be resurfaced every so often. But we did this on an existing roof, very inexpensive. It took our energy costs down, just for our HVAC, 20.9% over a year, all by itself. So that, plus the little things that we did, like turn off our monitors when we left the office, not just our computers every night, just turning off things that we were leaving on in sleep mode, we were able to determine that the amount of the corresponding CO2 offset basically was, if you took a brand new car, this is in 2013, if you took a brand new car with all the emissions controls that it has on it, and you drove it from Austin to Chicago and back twice, that's what we saved in a year by doing those things, unplugging our turning off our monitors and putting this new roof on. So it was an empirical thing, but the deal was that it was somebody who was 25 in our office who said, hey, I think it's the roof, I think we could do a lot better with this roof. And so that's what we did. And so I think that it's we're constantly learning and testing and learning and testing, and I think that that's, it's fun. It's a game at the end. How can you beat this? How can you do better? Mm-hmm. So.
Good. Well, I guess for me, it gets back to our office. And we have our conference rooms, to get the natural daylight, everything's transparent, right? Which says a lot about your corporate culture right there, because you've got meetings with clients and everybody knows who you're meeting with. But people in our community like our building so much that it is probably the most used conference rooms and meeting spaces in the city of Albuquerque. We have photography clubs, art clubs, churches, every group you can think of that wants to do a strategic planning session wants to come to our office. And we didn't intend to do that when we started it, but you know, people intuitively get cool spaces. They like to go there and they tell other people about it. So, you know, being the shameless promoters that we are, we built this, we didn't know it, but now everybody who comes into our space, they know it's a LEED certified building, they know it's a green building, and they know it's cool space. So when you put those three things together, you start to modify people's thinking about what their expectation is. If they go to other places, they say, well, why isn't this cool? Why don't they have glass in their conference rooms here? Maybe we should do something. Maybe we should have open office. Maybe we should affect our sunscreens over our windows and do things. So, you know, really, we're a profession that can lead and should lead by example in everything that we do. And so that's been the best thing for us, and it's worked out very good from a business point of view, a building ownership point of view, and then our building stayed occupied during the worst recession in the history of man, and we have clients that were leasing our space at the top of the market because they wanted to be in a sustainable building. So it paid off for us, both as from a professional point of view, business point of view, and building ownership point of view.
Yeah, I mean, just from the business perspective, I have a developer client that says occasionally good design sells and better design sells better. That's kind of commoditizing design, but hey, whatever it takes, you know. I mean, if they'll come along for that, great. The one, I guess, pleasant surprise or a rewarding story I can think of, besides my children who constantly lecture my in-laws because they live in a place without recycling, and they ask me sometimes if Grandma and Grandpa are bad people because they no, it's okay. They don't have recycling. You know, they're not bad people. So that shows you how our culture has changed. You know, my children literally scold people for throwing cans in the trash. A couple years ago, we did a corporate project where we were pushing underfloor air. And this was a large financial services company that had never done that. And when you've got a 50-plus facilities guy that's never done it, you know, he's not looking to experiment. He wants to go with what he wants and knows. So we convinced him through a lot of meetings, frankly at our own cost, convincing him, bringing a mechanical engineer, to do this system, underfloor air. See, if you'll do this, you'll get this benefit, that benefit. Everybody controls their own destiny as far as air is concerned. And we even got into the workplace issue of, look, it'll reduce your absenteeism. You know, he wasn't really buying it. So we mocked up one floor, not mocked up, they built one floor in their new building. And he did it a little bit wrong. You know, you're supposed to have 12 to 18 inches under your floor, and he wanted 3 feet, which opened up a whole different can of issues, including fire protection. But anyway, after it was done, he wanted to try it right on the next floor. So the next floor was installed pretty much by the book. And it was a pleasure to walk about a year later with another client who wanted to look at an underfloor air system, and to walk with those facilities people and see the smile on their face. Wow, it's great, we love it. You know, and they're taking us over and showing the grills on the floor, how each person can adjust it under their desk. If you're someone that's naturally cold, turn it off. If you're somebody that's naturally hot, turn it wide open. And it was just frankly that simple. You know, it's just individual human comfort. And I think now going forward, they'll never build another type system after having experienced that system. It made every sense in the world to do it. It was a little bit extra upfront cost. They had to adjust some floor heights with elevators and what have you. But to get it done and see them happy living with it was, I guess, personally rewarding, because I kind of stepped out there a little bit as a professional, and you know, I had the mechanical engineer behind me saying, "This is going to work, right?" And he said, yeah, it'll be great, don't worry. So to have that work out was a personal relief, but also a pleasure.
Excellent. Any other questions that any of you would like to? Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I guess I come from a perspective on the grad student in landscape architecture, and I guess so many times in this area, we build a big dream house or a big custom house. When it comes down to landscape, there's no money left. I'm just curious, how many times does that occur with you, where the landscape portion, and they just like, well, we'll just put in regular grass, vegetable grass, not native plants. Does that happen a lot, or if it does, how do you fight against it?
We have that battle a lot, and what we try to do with our clients is explain that the building is in dialogue with the landscape, and without the landscape there, it's naked. And it doesn't look the same, it doesn't function the same, and it's just not. A lot of times we say that we think our buildings are too stark without that softening, that thing that happens between them, that it's, it is a balance. And we're always saying, could you just not buy that $20,000 sofa and buy that $20,000 worth of landscaping outside instead? Yeah. So we'd rather have them living with no furniture and landscape than living with a lot of furniture and no landscape. So that's our deal. And it's,
yeah, you got to come meet our head of landscape. Her name's Mimi Burns, and Mimi, I mean, we've had epic battles between the architects and the landscape architects. I'll just tell you right now, we do. And Mimi always wins because she always has the most logical, sustainable reason for everything she does. And quite frankly, this isn't a knock against architects too much. We don't know that much about landscape architecture. I mean, I like to say we know a little bit about everything, which is probably true, but when it comes to landscape architecture, there is true beauty in a landscape architect that can translate sustainability, the plant types, the technology to deliver just the right amount of water, the ability to create landscapes that recharge groundwater and direct drainage flows and do things and cut down on heat island effect and everything else that Mimi tells me that I should be paying way more attention to when we design our buildings and our sites. But I totally agree with you. I think that we're moving into an era of sensitive design around resources.
Yeah.
And so what happens outside the building and our ability to deal with the heat island effect in urban areas and rethink the whole asphalt resurfacing of the universe, the ability to deal with delivering just that right amount of water at just the right amount, at just the right time to get the maximum plant growth or whatever it is that you're looking for is, again, phenomenal. And sensors, again. I mean, these sensors now are so sophisticated, you can just about fine-tune your landscape probably easier than you can buildings because of sensors. And so anyway, you got a world of fun ahead of you too, man. We're gonna see a completely different world once the landscape architects get cut loose.
I've seen a lot of, I'm in a lifestyle studio and we talk a lot about, the human experience. I'm a big believer in water in the landscape. Now again, not crazy water. And I want to say something else about water because we haven't talked about that at all too much. We have a lot of clients, especially if they're for-profit clients, they want no part of water features. And I think that's an opportunity lost. No one on our team is pushing, the fountains in Vegas, nothing like that. But I think there's a lot of great opportunities for water features, even in single-family homes. And I always hate to see those get cut out in the end. All that said, we've talked a lot about energy today and what have you, but Glenn and I were talking at lunch. I actually personally believe in America we're going to solve the energy issue. We've gotten so much better with how to generate energy, and as much as America's growing, energy is staying relatively affordable. Water is what concerns me. And I'm going to tell you, if you're here and you're an urban planning certificate person, water is the single greatest design driver that especially the American Southwest is going to deal with. There are entire regions in California that have literally gone dry. And if you think power and energy is an issue, wait till you don't have water in your cities. We haven't talked near as much about that, but I think the water issue alone is the single greatest design driver in North America. Now, if you're in upstate Washington or something like that, no, they're selling their water. They have so much of it. It's not a problem there. But in the American Southwest, that is a big deal. And I know Lubbock's just come through a drought too. But I think the water issues and how we manage our water, you know, there's all kinds of legislative issues and stuff like that that Texas maybe isn't doing so well at. But water alone, I think as, you know, as America reaches 400 million people, the water's going to have to come from somewhere, and how we manage it is the real deal.
Yep.
It will literally stop development. That's my biggest concern about it.
That's a good point. It's interesting though, the city that is the most aggressive about water is Las Vegas. And they recycle like 96% of their water.
Wow.
And it's because of a woman who came along and became mayor, and this became her issue, and she got the whole community behind her, and they totally redid all of their water. This has been a wonderful experience. I really thank my panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You all are indeed my heroes, so thank you.